My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So, I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and I'm here today to help you build your security architect career or your cloud security architect career. And by being here, I'm here to answer any questions you may have. I remember when I started my career about 25 years ago, I had no idea where to go. I went and wasted my time, my effort, my money on a whole lot of certifications and ultimately got nowhere. And then I was very lucky. I found exactly what hiring managers wanted. I did a research study exactly to find that out, became exactly what the hiring managers wanted, and got my first job as a senior engineer. Within 3 months was out lead architect, and you can do the same. So I'm here today to help you build your career. Maybe you desire to be a network architect, for example, even if it's not a security architect. Ask me, I can help you. I've been a network architect for a few decades, and that's some part of my career as well. If your goal is to be a security architect and you want to know what to learn, know what skills you need, know the difference between security architecture and security engineering, that's fine. Just ask questions so we can do whatever we can to build your security career, whether that's in standard security, a cloud security, or the reality in today's world is a combination of both. So that's what we're here for today. Now, before I start taking questions, and please bring me your questions because I truly want to help you, I wanted to let you know about two things. On Thursday this week, we are going to have a live webinar on Zoom where it's all about how to become a security architect. And on this webinar, I'll talk about everything you need to do to get your first security architect job. All the skills you need to learn, the things that you need to do to build your brand, how and why and what hiring managers want, all of it. And it's all free on this free architecture webinar specifically related to security architects. And come and ask any questions and we'll do everything we can to help you. If you're not getting interviews, that's fine. Ask me and I can assess why. You're not winning interviews you want me to assess, I can assess why, all in this free security architect webinar. And it is on Thursday. So my team dropped the link into the chat box. So sign up for it. And I hope to meet you in person live on Zoom on Thursday. I also wanted to let everybody know that we have 50% off for the last day. Our summer savings is officially ending today. So there's less than 24 hours left to take care of it. If you're interested in that discount, I would suggest taking advantage of it now. And Tyrone or Chris or whoever's behind the scenes, because I know you guys were swapping around earlier, could you bring in the first question? Flying kites, when I hear you and Dave speak, it sounds like a lot to become an architect. Can I discuss this? So flying kites, great question. And here's the way I see it. There's really two different kinds of careers. There are careers where basically there's no barrier to entry. It's pretty easy to get these jobs. And every day is a struggle for the rest of your life. And then there's some other jobs. Now, they take a bit of hard work. They take some preparation and they take some time to learn. But when you're finished learning and you have one of these jobs, every job day is a pleasure for the rest of your life. So yes, it is a little bit of oomph and a little bit of effort up front to actually learn these things, but the payoff and the investment is so worth it. So I go after things that have high value, and realistically speaking, the security architect career, the cloud architect career, the AI architect career, as a rule, they pay about as much as a physician or an attorney. And you can learn them in my mind, and I've seen it. I've gotten people hired in, say, 8 to 12 months. And even if somebody takes 18 months to learn it, it's still an incredible career. And the lifetime reward for that is definitely worth it. Great question there, Flying Kites. Cloud Doctor, relating to today's YouTube video, how does one frame one's engineering experience so it shows the architectural impact on the interview? Cloud Doctor, great question. I'm glad you asked that question because I hate when this happens. I'll tell you about 50%, actually more than the interviews I've always done. We interviewed someone for an architect role, whether it was a solutions architect, a security architect, enterprise architect, what have you, and they walk in there and they show themselves as an engineer. And unfortunately, they can't be hired for that. So let's talk about the differences between the roles and how do you show the difference and how you communicate about it. Architecture is about planning. So if we look at architecture, it's about the what and the why. We're working at what do we build and why do we build it from a business perspective? What does it do? Does it give us growth? For example, does it add resiliency to the business? Is it to meet some regulatory things? So for us, it's we architects, it's the what and the why. Now the engineer, for them, it's about how do they build it? So they're looking at whatever they need to do to put it in reality. So designer versus doer, planner versus doer. So then I'll tell you exactly how to do it. Now, the next thing is we architects think in business capability. So we start with the organization and its capabilities. What's it good at? Is it good at sales? Does it have some special supply chain which enables it to be its competitive advantage? Does it have something? So we look at the business's capabilities as architects, and then we think about how do we enhance those business capabilities through optimization of people, processes, and technology. And then engineering thinks, how do I build it? What kind of APIs, what kind of infrastructure as code? So there's a very different thing. I'll give you the couple more differences, and then I'll tell you how to sell it, but I want you to truly understand the difference. So we're thinking as architects years in the future of what we're planning. The engineering things are built now. Maybe the time frame is now 6 months from now, but we architects could be planning 20 years in the future, especially as an enterprise architect. So it's a different place that we're playing. So when we think as an architect, we're thinking about the portfolio trade-offs. So where do we put our investments? Do we put it in people? Do we put it in technology? Do we put it in AI? Do we put it in security? Where do we put it? We have to determine what's going to be the best bang for the buck for the business and build business cases for this. And engineering is thinking about how do I meet those performance standards? So it's something very different. For example, when I think of architecture and cloud architecture, I start thinking of guardrails and standards, like a landing zone. Engineering is typically going to focus on an infrastructure as code module or a CI/CD tool. I'm, as an enterprise architect, going to look at the organization's operating model. Should they use a unification, a diversification, what have you? What kind of standardization do they need in their key processes? And engineering is trying to create the features for what we need. So where it gets interesting is the outcome metrics. And if we look at the outcome metrics of an architect, it could be time to market of a new offering, cost to serve our clients, what kind of thing we did to how do we reduce our risk reduction? Did we have a revenue lift? What have you? That's an architect thing. Now, engineering is going to check the output, the lead time, the failure rate, what have you. So if you realize that, and if you frame it that way on the difference between the architect strategist and the engineer build it, when people fail the interview is they come in and they talk about this new fancy microservices website and how they used all these little cloud native tools. And as soon as the person says that, the interview is over because they prove that they're not thinking in terms of a business strategist. Now, if at the same time the organization said, We had an organization. They had a dilapidated data center. They had an old monolithic application that was barely holding things together. The organization did not have the time or the desire to manage a data center properly. So we had re-architected their website. We had migrated it to the cloud, and we achieved several great things. The first thing we achieved was a 27% uplift in revenue. That new website was bringing in much more money. The other thing that we noticed is we took our availability from barely 99.9% to 99.99%, and that had an additional 4% on revenue because we didn't lose sales during that time. Now, that's the architect way of saying it. So the key is to remember that the architect is the strategist and the architect talks to things. I could do it in networking too, and I've designed some very heavy duty, $100 million plus just routers and switches networks. And, it could be one of two things. The engineer might say these routers have a certain number of packets per second, they can do what have you. We architects say now that we've implemented this new network, you can now offer private line services, video services, these services to your client, and we should be able to yield about $6 billion of revenue for that $1 billion of infrastructure spending, what have you. So it's a different thing. So that Cloud Doctor, that's how you do it. You bring it to a business thing, you bring it to a strategist, you show them that tech is no longer your focus like it would be as an engineer. The tech is just a tool that you can use to create strategy for your clients to have a competitive advantage. Hope that helps. And you know what, Cloud Doctor, come to the architecture webinar tomorrow and we can get much deeper into this. But great question. And we have a webinar on Thursday. So not tomorrow. Andreas, hi Mike, getting started with TOGAFs. Any tips or tips to get started with it? So Andreas, let me tell you my perspective on TOGAF, and I do like TOGAF and I do recommend it. The first thing to study and to understand, Andreas, that TOGAF is just a set of steps. So in step 1, we do this. In step 2, we do this. In step 3. Now, what kind of set of steps are they? They're loosely aligned to this. And I'll show you what I mean by that loosely. And I'll show you what I mean by loosely. Bear with me. So if we actually look at the steps of an architecture, so to speak, and we actually look at what we do, there's really probably 5 phases that there are 6 phases that really go on. And TOGAF has their phases A through whatever, but they're basically these things. The first thing we need to do, and whenever we get with a client, is meet with the executive sponsors, determine the vision, the scope, the business requirements of what we're trying to achieve, identify the stakeholders, what have you. So that covers the TOGAF preliminary phase A and B. And in that TOGAF thing, it's going to give you standardized names for things and terms, which is a good thing. Now, the second phase of TOGAF, realistically speaking, is to look at the plan and optimize the business architecture. The third phase of TOGAF would be to optimize the data architecture and the application architecture. The fourth phase of TOGAF would be technology, but I consolidated them. So the key point is, in an architecture engagement, we've got to meet with the clients, figure out what we're doing, what the requirements are, what success is, who the stakeholders are. Then we have to evaluate the business, understand the key processes, value streams, the business's capability, map that stuff out. Map out the business architecture and tune it to the way we want to do things in the future. Then we need to map out the data, the application architecture of the present and the future. Then we have to do it for the technology, whether that be the data center, the cloud, the technology, the infrastructure. Then at some point, we've got to create that solutions architecture where we basically take a virtual machine and call it an EC2 instance if we buy it at AWS. And then we have to set up the migration planning. And then we have to set up the governance structure, the governance of the implementation, the governance of the architecture, any kind of change management, architectural review boards. So, that's loosely the TOGAF process. Now, what I like about TOGAF is it keeps people from doing dangerous things like starting with the technology first and not focusing on the business, which is what I love. But here's the problem with TOGAF, Andreas. It doesn't tell you how to do any of the steps. So if it's got a phase A and a phase B and a phase C, it tells you, do this, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. So it's the equivalent of me saying, and I used to practice internal medicine, I'm a nurse practitioner. It's the equivalent of me saying the patient has a tension pneumothorax, insert a chest tube to fix it. If you don't know how to insert the chest tube, it doesn't matter that somebody told you the patient has a tension pneumothorax and how to put in a chest tube. That's the big problem with TOGAF. It says do this, but it doesn't teach you any of it. So Andreas, the thing that I would really focus on is make sure that I have all the skills to be an enterprise architect and use TOGAF only for branding. And that's like any certification. It's great. Employers are going to look at it. They're going to want to interview for it. It is great, but don't count on it to actually educate you. And it's taken me some time to get used to TOGAF. When I first looked at it, I said it's an arbitrary set of steps. And I couldn't imagine why anybody wanted this earlier in my career, to be truthful. And then I started to see that not everybody followed a logical plan. Not everybody started with the business strategy and what are we trying to achieve from a business perspective and didn't really map out the business. And without that, we really get gaps and major technology failures. So TOGAF has grown on me over the years. So has Zachman and any of these enterprise architecture frameworks. They just keep you doing things in a standard thing. So all that is a standard methodology. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And I think it's a good approach to follow. And I'll just keep it at that. Don't think it's going to make you an architect, but realize it is a set of steps. And it is a checklist set of steps that'll keep you from making errors. And for that, I love it. Great question, Andreas. Please ask more. What knowledge, skills, and certification one needs to land a security architect role? You know what? I'm going to do a complete and total webinar on that tomorrow, but let's have some fun with it, and I'll kind of map it out. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the biggest thing to think of first. And then I'll actually dive deep into the domains of security and what these things might be in each of those domains. So if we actually look at this particular example here, if we look at security architect skills, I want you to notice two things. First, the majority of these skills are non-technical. I want you to see that. So about 65% of the security architect role is non-technical. And of the things that are inside of this domain, we will not be configuring or touching, which is why engineering will typically not help you in the background. But we're dealing with different things. So what are we talking about here? The majority of the job is understanding the organization and its business, because we need to protect that business somehow. So we need to understand business, be able to understand assets, understand risk, that kind of thing. We will have to be strategic in creating a strategic plan to protect the organization from harm. The biggest element of a security architect job or any other architect job is stakeholder management, which is meeting and managing stakeholders. Realistically speaking, at least half of your time will be speaking to client stakeholders and other stakeholders. Now, you will be negotiating constantly in the architect job, negotiating between stakeholders, negotiating between departments. So that's going to be critical. You will have to know how to create organizational change. So what does it take to change the culture? What does it take to change a training program? How do you get people to adopt whatever you're talking about from a high security perspective? You will need to be able to walk in the room with executives, which means you're going to have some executive presence and executive communications. And you're going to have to be able to convince that executive to spend maybe $100 billion on your security architecture. So you're going to have to speak like an executive and know how to take risk and convert risk to dollars and then sell based upon dollars of risk. For example, if your risk is $28 million this year, and I can mitigate your risk for $3 million, that's a good business case to do it. So the majority of that is going to be managing vendors, because we'll have maybe 20 security vendors we deal with, getting information from clients, and of course, convincing the clients to adopt it. So this is 60 to 70% of the job here. Now, realistically speaking, when it comes down to security, it's these main elements. And what do we mean by this? So we have to find a way to protect the organization's data. So we security architects will need to find a way to do it. Now, maybe we minimize the data through data lifecycle, so we don't have a lot of data. Maybe we tokenize some of the data, replacing real things like that with things that don't mean anything, the way you would do with your credit card. Maybe we anonymize or pseudo-anonymize the data somewhere along the line to make sure that it's harder to figure out whose data it actually is. Maybe we encrypt the data. Oh, so, but everything and encrypted data in motion, in flight, do we need to even encrypt it in DRAM and CPUs with secure computing? So that's what we need to think about from a data perspective. Now, we need to think about how do we design the systems to be secure? Again, we're not touching a firewall. We're not going to configure anything. We're not engineers. But what kind of network security would we use? Would we use network segmentation like VLANs, or for example, would we use rate limiting or quality of service? Would we use firewalls, IDS, IPS, egress data loss prevention systems? What are we doing for security on the network? Same thing with risk management is going to be a key element of our job. Quantifying the risk, managing the risk, prioritizing risk, and making recommendations on the risk. Is the risk so large we transfer the risk to an insurance company, or do we try to do we try to mitigate the risk with XYZ technology or other controls that we do? So that's realistically what we're doing from a risk management perspective. Now, a lot of what we do is craft security policies, incident response procedures, standards, guidelines. So you'll have to know a lot about creating security policy. Now, obviously, we teach 100% of these skills, business skills and otherwise, because you don't get hired without them. But these are the kind of things. Now, same thing with identity. You're going to have to know how to create an identity strategy. What kind of authentication should you use and why should you use it? What are the weaknesses and limitations between one type and another type? Iris versus retina versus fingerprint, what have you, to determine who you are, who you claim to be. For example, do we go zero trust? Can we use attribute-based access control? Do we need context aware? Should we use role-based with it? Or what's enough? So customer IAM, privileged account management. So we have to be pretty good at creating a strategy around that. Again, we don't touch the technology, it's the strategy. Now, obviously, you might need a team of people and lead a team of people because the IAM architects, that could be their whole job. Now, you will need to know a lot about encryption. Of course, if you were with us, we teach you, but you have to think about encryption. What kind of encryption to use? Where do you use the encryption? How do you manage your keys? What's the impact of higher performance compute like GPUs and quantum computing on the types of encryption strategies used? As an architect, we don't do things like operations-wise, but we still need to know a little bit about security operations so we know how to design systems that somebody else can actually manage. We need to be able to think about things from a management perspective. Now, a lot of our work is mapping to a security framework, something like NIST, although recently everybody's migrating towards zero trust because of the weaknesses inherent in cloud security and all the SaaS providers people are using. So we need a different approach now that we have weaker parameters. That's moving everybody towards, say, zero trust. We have to know about application security. For example, what goes into protecting applications, what goes into protecting APIs, maybe rate limiting, maybe secure coding practices. We don't code, but we need to maybe talk about what they are and how you would test the code, for example. We definitely get involved in security governance and rules, regulations, and making sure we can adhere to whatever requirements we need. Get involved in a lot of business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning, incident response planning. And sometimes, not always, but I usually do. I even get involved in the physical security because that's part of the entire cohesiveness. So they're your real components of a security architect career, but they're not the how-to. I mean, you're not going to touch a firewall in your 30-year career as a security architect. You're not going to touch an IDS IPS system. You're not going to touch Okta or Active Directory unless you're signing in yourself as a client. You're designing a strategy. So those are the types of things that you need to understand. How would you design it? How would you protect or determine an organization's needs? And then how would you protect them from harm? Great question. If someone is already a cloud network engineer for 5 to 7 years, when is the sweet spot to transition into a solutions architect or cloud architect role? So Night Sky, you're making an assumption that the time you spend in engineering is going to help you move into an architect role. And I'm going to tell you that there's a lot that you've learned in your engineering time, but it's not going to help you transition at all into an architect role. And you're going to need to do either what I did or take a course like ours. So here's what I did, Night Sky. I went and got a master's in business administration. I went and got an executive coach. I went and got about $100,000 on leadership training, CXO relevancy sales training to move into a big architect job. So what's the difference between what people think we do as architects versus what we actually do as cloud architects? So here's why I say it's not going to help you. So you've been a network engineer for 5 to 7 years. I love it. Now, if I were to ask you, could you tell me the difference between a stub area, a not so stubby area, a totally stubby area, the LSAs that are in there, and why we might use these areas to optimize our LSAs? You might be a network engineer and still not be able to answer that. And the reason is you might be configuring things all day long, but not creating a strategy. There's plenty of network engineers that I know with 7 years of experience that I say, we need to connect to 8 ISPs for optimal routing and low latency. Could you tell me how we would set up routing to load share across all 8 paths without getting out of order packets? And the reason in most cases the engineer can't do that or can't actually tell me what to do is because they spent their whole life actually configuring things. So Night Sky Owl, for example, I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I did the CCIA. My CCIA number is 71417. That was my intro to networking. And that taught me how to configure routers. But it did not teach me anything about designing networks. So it taught me how to build them. And why do I say that? Because network design, and Cisco has network architects, and Cisco has engineers. Architects design, engineers build, and it's always going to be that way. So let me kind of show you why the networking itself is not going to get you any cloud architect role or solutions architect role unless it's in a networking field. And I'll show you why. So let's actually look at, say, a cloud architect skills and the majority of the skills. And let's take the tale of 2 people. Person 1 is a sales executive. Now, what if I told you that the highest paying architect roles are enterprise architect roles, and 50% of them never came from a tech background, the people that are working in here? And here's the reason why. The biggest component you need as a cloud architect is business acumen, because the companies are not migrating their stuff to the cloud to say, hey, it's cool technology. They're doing it for competitive advantage. And if you don't know business, you can't create competitive advantage, which is why, you know, I got an MBA and a whole lot of other executive training to even be an architect. You don't get that by configuring routers, switches, firewalls, but you will need it for the job. 70% of all architectures fail because the architects don't have business acumen, according to McKinsey. The next thing that you will need to know is what's called CXO relevance. And here's what that means. I need to know that if we walk in the room, you can communicate to the CEO in their language. So that literally means, you know, if you're a network architect, you should be able to walk into the CEO's office with Verizon, and you should be able to show them a business case about why they should invest $2 billion in your network architecture based on what it's going to do for their business. That's a network architect thing to do versus a network engineer. Now, as an architect, it's going to take about 6 months of asking stakeholders questions. 50 to 60% of our time is spent managing stakeholders. That means identifying who they are, communicating with them, figuring out what their needs are, coordinating between stakeholders across departments, because maybe sales wants something different than product needs. So we've got to manage between them. This is a job of negotiating constantly with stakeholders, negotiating with everyone. So you need some pretty strong negotiation skills. Now you have to be able to sell, because if you design a beautiful architecture, but you can't convince the company to invest in it, all you created was a 500-page Word document and PowerPoint slides. So you have to be able to sell. You have to be able to get all kinds of information, including mistakes in business and things people are embarrassed to say in order to solve their problems. So you're going to have to be trained practically like a physician or a spy in terms of asking questions without people realizing it. You will have to be able to exercise influence and get the board and the C-suite to see your point, to get people to want to work for you. Otherwise, you won't be functional. Now, when it comes to a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, we have to look at all of the elements of business, which are these. So companies have people that actually do the job. The processes are the way people do their job. So if we have better people and we can get them to do their jobs better, then typically speaking, the business is better. And what architecture is figuring out what the best people are, the best way for them to do their job, and then the best technology to enable the people to do their jobs better. So that's really architecture. So if you look at that when it's architecture of what we're doing, and then we go back to the slide that I was trying to show you, that process optimization is key. Now, your presentation skills are so critical in this role that the last interview for any architect role is a presentation. Now, Networking is probably one of the better tech backgrounds, but actually let's look at that. So let's say you wanted to be a cloud architect or a cloud solutions architect. You might know some of the networking. Probably not the network design, like how would you design your IP addressing plan, but let's say you do. Let's say you're solid on networking. You will still need to learn applications and application architecture, what have you, all kinds of compute and storage and DNS load balancing, which most network people don't know, GPU load balancing, every kind of load balancing you can think of across clouds, data centers, what have you. Compute, most networking people, we don't typically think of whether it goes on a server or a container or a function as a service or application virtualization, and what are the trade-offs that we can use in between them. In any architect role, we're designing AI systems at this point. Most networking people, and again, I'm a networking person, didn't naturally know storage. When to use block storage, when to use file storage, when to use object storage, when it's all too slow and you need to use various kinds of RAID and other workarounds. Now, when it comes to security, we're not just talking network security. We're talking every element of security. Same thing with data security. How do you secure data? The same thing with IAM. So when we've got a network person, let's say a network engineer with a 10 years experience, they typically have knowledge in this one thing, but lack it in everywhere else. Now let's look at someone that's a little bit different. Let's look at the careers that are the easiest to get someone an architect job. Sales reps, nurses, anybody that's communicating on a daily basis. Why? Well, they're typically very emotionally intelligent. They typically already know how to sell. They typically all know how to get information. They typically know how to influence others and present things in a manner to be trusted. They typically all have been trained in some degree of presence along the way to walk in and command the room. And when someone already has that, then it's just a matter of learning the tech stuff, which is the easy stuff for the architect, and then some of the things. So we can all be an architect. Every last one of us can. But if you spend another minute in engineering, you're just going to get better at engineering. And I can give you an example. It's like Harsha, for example, is a cloud engineer with a decade of experience. And it took me about 14 months to get him his first cloud architect job. I'll also use Jazz. I'll call him Jazz. Jazz was a cloud engineer for about a decade of experience in New Jersey. Took me about a year to get him hired at AWS. Now let's talk about Yvonne, who was a 24-year-old college student, hired by AWS in a solutions architect role in about 6 months. Or Jeffrey, who went over to Kalian as a solutions architect in about 4 months, and he was not coming from the tech role either. Or someone like Balwinder, who was hired by Microsoft in about 9 months. And she was a stay-at-home mom. So it's not the job you had in the past. It's having the right skills for the job you actually want in the future. If someone was a flight attendant for a decade, it doesn't naturally prepare them to be an airplane pilot. They still have to go to flight school. So I love engineers. And I work with engineers in every architecture I've ever been in. And I've even been an engineer. But engineering does not prepare one for architecture. I really, really wish it did. As more and more organizations want to leverage AI, how can a security architect leverage AI? You know about agentic AI. What apart from that, learning implementation AI is altogether a challenge. So the question becomes do you want to be an AI architect? Do you want to be a security architect? Or do you want to be a security architect that focuses on AI? So we have to realize that we don't do stuff. So the whole reason these architecture jobs are so great is, let me show you why we're not going to be using AI like others. And then I'll show you how and where we could use AI. Actually, maybe I'll show you how we can use AI and how I would use it. I use AI to do deep research. Find me statistics and sources for certain things. Give me links and cite it in APA format, which is what I'm used to. So I use AI for research that's actually there, and I find it to be good to document initial primary research. Of course, I still do my other research. Now, as an architect, one of the things you're going to be dealing with is responding to a lot of RFPs. And when you respond to a tremendous number of RFPs, these things can become fairly laborious. And a properly trained small language model, potentially that an organization could have, especially if they've got a large sales force, could easily create the boilerplate RFP responses based upon an organization's environment. And that would typically help. But, and you know, there might be a time where we can use AI to mine business data. And if it's mining business data, it can help us find inefficiencies to make further business recommendations. But what's big about the architect role is very different than the engineering role. And I want you to understand that. What engineers can do is they can use AI to code, which is the reason companies like Salesforce just fired 40% of their back-end people like engineers. Same reason Microsoft is laying off engineers. It's the same reason they're all laying off engineers, and then a day later hiring architects, hiring salespeople, hiring anybody that can sell a product or design a product, not build the product, because AI can build it. So let's look at what AI can do and what AI cannot do, and let's look at the main elements of the actual architect job that I actually talked about. And then let's talk about why AI is just creates more jobs for us. So if we go to this environment right here, here's a World Economic Forum Skills 2030. And if we look at the jobs of yesterday, the jobs that are being crushed and killed by AI, look very carefully. It's programming, because AI does a great job coding and it's getting better by the day. But there's an incredible amount of money being invested in here. People that have what you call I would call them old world skills, like I'm used to knowing what to say and what part of the world. I speak multiple languages to make life easier to communicate with people, but AI can take over that stuff. I think even Apple headphones even do it automatically for you. Reading, writing, and math. Again, there were people like me that would read 1,000 pages a day and siphon it out to learn the things. We're getting to a point where we can assimilate and digest information quicker in some ways with AI while still doing normal research. Sensory processing things, we can use AI to do this. So these are the dead jobs. Now let's look at the future jobs that actually exist of the future, and let's look at the skills. AI and big data. Every architect in the world in some way is working with AI and big data, and not the programming of the stuff, because that can be done, but the strategy around it. The big piece of the architect role is it takes creativity. We have this business problem versus this business problem. How can we creatively solve it? In order to be able to connect with this provider, we had to open these security weaknesses. And in order to open these security weaknesses, what can we do to protect ourselves, and what we had to do to open the security weaknesses to do business? And that might get real creative real fast. In any of these roles like architecture, you're constantly learning something because the world changes. As architects, a big part of what we do is actually manage people, groom people, create and lead teams, interview people, what have you. So that's talent management. Systems thinking. Architecture is the big systems thinking role. And this is one of the reasons engineering typically doesn't carry over very well. Engineering is about, what's that thing in front of me? How do I configure that router? How do I configure that virtual machine? Architecture is more systems thinking. If I open a BGP session with a router in Japan, what is the impact to Tyron, who's in Cape Town, South Africa? What is the impact to Sally, who's in Baltimore, Maryland? What is the impact to Nikos, who's in Athens, Greece? That kind of impact analysis, systems thinking is all architecture. Leadership and social influence. And architecture, I was talking about leading and influencing others. Analytical thinking, we're always thinking analytically, which is where AI is good and bad. AI is good when it has the information, but in architecture, it's nearly always information it's almost always doing things that no one ever has before. So it's making the best decisions. So we have to think about all of that. So when you start looking at those things, if you want to bring the question back on the screen, because there was a reason I went on all these. So when we start looking at all these elements here, we're really talking about that. So AI is not going to help you as a security architect. What's going to help you as a security architect is better business skills, better leadership skills, better sales skills, better executive presence, greater emotional intelligence. That may help you $200,000-$300,000 or more per year in uplift. That will definitely have a big impact. AI, not so much, because as a security architect, your focus is security. Now, as a security architect, do you have to have very solid how do you secure AI worlds skills? The answer to that is yes. But again, that goes into security architecture. So when it comes to security, AI is assumed. I mean, I don't know why. People think AI is new. The first AI project I worked on was in 2001, and it was a trading system that was automatically training based upon news systems. David Lithicum, who's our chief AI instructor and has been working with AI since 1985. So we always, at least David and I have assumed for the last few decades, that if AI is part of our architecture in some way, and we have to secure it. But most people are not there. So don't think architects are going to be using this stuff a lot. I mean, sure, maybe we could use an AI agent to summarize our email for us, create an auto response that we can tune. But the big component of the architect job is it's a finesse job. It's to go meet with someone. It's to go take them to dinner. It's to go take them to drinks. It's to go build a relationship. And all those things are all human to human to human to human. And as architects, we don't implement anything. We design things. And how do we design systems? We create an architecture team. So in every architecture, let's say I'm brought in a new cloud architecture or a new security architecture. A big bank calls me in. Mike, I need you to create a new architecture. We need a new enterprise-wide security architecture. Okay. I'm going to need to build it. Which stakeholders can I speak to? Which is probably going to be at least 75 of them. Which vendors do I need to speak to that you're dealing with? When I understand that, I'm going to build a team. Maybe, just maybe, I need 5 to 10 security architects, and I'm going to lead it. Maybe I need some network security people on my team. Maybe I need some AI security people on my team, and believe me, I will. Maybe I'm going to need some IAM people on my team. Maybe I'm going to need some application security people on my team. Maybe I need some risk management people on my team. So that's what I want you to think about architecture. It is a team sport. It is you being an executive. So it's not how AI is going to help you be a better executive. It's what you can use AI to enhance business performance. Or you could use AI to enhance security. But in reality, if you're a good security architect, you've been using AI in your security anyway. AI in your behavioral anomaly and your firewalls, potentially some AI in your data loss prevention systems, AI in your SIEM and source systems, AI in your context-aware IAM. So you're already using AI to enhance your security. So it's just in more tools we can do. So I hope that answers your question. Because these are really great questions. Now, if anybody has any questions on security architect careers, or even cloud architect careers, or enterprise architect careers, or cloud security architect careers, please ask them. We want to do everything we can to really help you. And I love answering questions. I love to meet people. So please feel free to do that. And just follow the TOGAF. Is there any framework that addresses the house twos? No, that's the skills that you actually learn. So let me kind of give you the way that I've always looked at things and the way I train people, and then I'll walk you through the difference. So this is the way we train people, and this is the way that I switched from internal medicine to as a nurse practitioner to tech. The first thing that I did is made sure I had great skills for the job I want. Now let's look at any job that matters in the entire world for the most part. Your airplane pilot did not pass the certification and get asked to fly the plane. Your airplane pilot developed very good skills before they got certified. Your physician went to medical school before they passed their medical boards and got board certified. They were already able to be a doctor. So the way we train people is you become great first. So the first phase is learning how to be an architect. Now, how do you learn those steps? You either get taught by a company like ours how to do these things, or you do what I did, which is you get a master's in business administration to learn the business. And then after that, you get some executive training for the other skills that are lacking. And then after that, you try to get a job at a consulting company like McKinsey, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, because they're going to teach you how to do the majority of what we actually do. And their people are called business architects. So the first phase is having all the skills to be great at the job. The next phase is being what the hiring manager wants. The phase after that is actually where you're going to build an architect portfolio. So you have to build a portfolio, the real world portfolio that shows you know what the job is. Most people send us engineering portfolios for an architect job and the interview ends there. Now, after you can do the job, after what the manager wants, and after you've done it and you have proof that you can do the job, That's when you get certified with things like TOGAF. Why? Because now you can do the job. And after that, that's just saying, hey, I'm going to look more attractive here. And the certifications, you also might actually do things like you're gonna, at least with us, you'll tune your resume, you'll tune your LinkedIn profile, you'll tune your content, you work on your brand, and then you get trained for the interview. So it's all these things. But the certifications are the last piece, because certifications never, 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 never teach skills. So that's the real secret. You have to have the skills. Now, where do you learn these kind of how-to skills? There's really only a few jobs that do this. So the how-to skills of the architect are, I learned them when I learned internal medicine. Because what does an internal medicine provider do? What does your physician do, your physician assistant? Someone walks into the office and they have a problem. My throat hurts, Mike. So what do I do based upon this? This is how I learned architecture. Well, I ask a lot of questions. Could you tell me what makes your throat better? Could you tell me what makes your throat worse? Could you tell me what happened, whatever? And when I get that, after that, I pretty much know what I think the problem is based upon what the patient told me. Now, after that, I do an exam. And I might do the exam. I look in their eyes, ears, nose, throat. I might even culture their throat, listen to their heart, lungs, what have you. And then after that, I come up with a diagnosis and I say, you have pharyngitis. And then I ask that patient, are you allergic to penicillin? And they say no. And I say, you can have amoxicillin 500 milligrams 4 times a day. And come back and see me in 2 weeks if you don't get better. That is architecture. And what did I do here? What does the same architect do? We walk into a business and the business has a problem. What brings you in today, as the doctor would say, is what problem are you trying to solve? You're trying to increase revenue, you're trying to do this. Then we ask a whole bunch of questions, just like the doctor did. And knowing those questions, you have to know what the job and learn how to ask those questions, the same way the doctor went to medical school first to learn how to which questions to ask, which is why we train architects. Once you know which questions to ask, you easily know how to diagnose this if you're properly trained. And whether that's a diagnosis for a new AI system, an AI system to mine through data, an AI to make recommendations, a new unified communications platform, I don't care, to connect people in real time to do new things together. That's your plan. The doctor's plan is the prescription. The architect's plan is the change in people, processes, and technology. So there's really no jobs that teach this except for the medicine job. The attorneys are trained exactly the same way. Look at whatever problem needs to be solved, examine whatever evidence you have, and create a plan around it. And management and strategy consultants are the same as architects. In fact, I really will tell you what really helped my architecture career, and sure, I'd been a network architect and I sort of fell into it. I went to business school, but what really helped my architect career is at Cisco, I had a chance. Not only was I the chief architect for the entire healthcare vertical, but I also was working as a business architect. And by doing so, I was doing a bit of management and strategy consulting. And that really helped me, walk in, figure out what the business architecture was, map out all the value streams, which we have to do, typically speaking, in an architecture, figure out all the business capabilities are and the key processes, tune those processes, and then start figuring out what technology we could do to do it. So there's that. But the good news about these jobs, like a physician job or an architect job or an attorney job, is you can't learn them on your own. And by the fact that somebody had to teach us all how to do these things, or if we didn't have it, would people like me spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on education, by the time you're taught this skill, you're in a job with zero competition because no one can do it. That's why these architect jobs are the hardest jobs in the world to find. That's why 50% of working enterprise architects didn't work in tech before, because it's a very consulting-oriented approach. So no, there's not going to be any framework that teaches how-tos, because all a framework always is a series of steps. Make sure you think about this. 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 That is by very definition a framework. Whether it's any of these frameworks, that's what they are. Incredibly great questions today. I'm glad you're asking them. Please feel free to ask more. What project should you build to build a strong architect portfolio? I love this question. And it's going to depend, honestly, on the type of architect you are. For example, a security architect's portfolio would look a little different than a cloud architect or an enterprise architect. This is what I would typically look for in, say, a cloud architect portfolio or an enterprise architect portfolio. I drew it the other day. And typically speaking, what I'm first going to be looking for are reference architectures. And all my students obviously have these in their portfolio from building them. Reference architectures might be a standard architecture that you would use as a baseline that you would adopt in various environments. So maybe you've got a standard demilitarized zone that you typically look at for a data center. Maybe you've got your standard zero trust mapping of an architecture. Maybe you've got various reference architectures for key management systems. I don't know, but you'll have reference architectures for various challenges you've solved. Now, in enterprise architect portfolio, I expect to see various business architectures. In a cloud architect, if I see business architectures and business capability maps inside of their portfolio, oh, they're going to be on the higher end of the earning side because now I know these are strategists. And a lot of what you will do in your architect role is you'll be creating thought leadership documents. You may actually look at the Cisco medical grade network and you'll see my name on it. And that was designed to show healthcare organizations throughout the globe how to create high availability secure technology platforms. And I created architectures or thought leadership on a lot of things designed to influence an industry. So creating those would be good. My students often do that. You'll have to create a business case. So you may have an architecture and you can always tell the engineer versus the architect. The engineer says, I can't convince people to spend money on this. And the architect says, what's your business case show? What's the ROI? What's your payback period? And the person says no. So you have to be able to build a business case. So my students have business cases for their architectures. Now you should often have this, and these may have to be heavily redacted or blocked depending upon where you've done them. As is and to be architectures. As is what you found. And to be is what you want it to be in the future, what you're designing it to be. You'll typically have some migration planning. You know, how many people do you need? What are the steps? Do we need a phased approach? What have you? At least my students will have RFP responses, but these may need to be heavily redacted depending upon the environment. You may have some security policies or incident policies or disaster recovery plans and policies you've created. Potentially that might be something you would show. Security people were definitely creating standards. Enterprise architects were creating standards. Cloud architects, maybe, maybe not, depending upon how senior they are. So these are the kind of things that belong in your portfolio because this is what we do. And the reason I cover that is one of the biggest things that people send me is they want to send me an engineering portfolio. And David Lithicum and I talk about it all the time. People try to send us their codes, send us their GitHub page, and all they've done is they've showed us they don't know what an architect is. Which is, if they don't know what it is, we can't hire them. We can't even waste our time interviewing someone that doesn't know what the job even is. Because if they don't know what the job is, they're clearly not going to have the skills for it in most cases. So those are the kind of things that'll really help build a portfolio. And these are rock solid questions. And these are not all CISOs are the same depending on the company. Why is there a much big gap in the same role? So what a great question, Andy. So let's talk about there's realistically speaking, a couple of kinds of organizations out there. And let's talk about them. There are some organizations that have a huge competitive advantage from technology. Look at the small organization Klarna and the valuation that it actually has. It was almost all tech. Look at what Walmart did to the supply chain industry. They were able to get everybody's products better, faster, and cheaper than the competition. Never run out of stuff. It was incredible through an incredible supply chain. Netflix and what they did by building their own CDN and then using other commodity things was be able to change the way we live, watch, play, watch TV, what have you. And they're one of the few that have even done it profitably. If we look at the way things have changed, any of the companies that are best at it tend to win. I mean, there are companies that produce social media that are, making money, and they're just sending advertisements and other things. So if we look at the tech companies that have leveraged technology, no, those companies, JP Morgan Chase Bank is an example of them. Those companies have serious strategy practices and technology strategy practices and architecture practices. And those people, whether the security people are the best in the world, whether they are the networking people, they're the best in the world, whether the AI people, they're some of the best in the world. These people are trained, these people are developed, and these people are very highly paid. Why? And why was 1 year the average bonus at Goldman Sachs just a bonus, $600,000 a year with that year? Because they brought in so much money and they made so much money per employee that it was a small bonus by comparison to what they actually did. So we have to look at the what, the where, the why. So if you find yourself in a company that cares about security, Cisco, IBM, for example, imagine if Cisco were to get hacked, or how bad it would look. How bad would it look when Palo Alto would get hacked? How bad would it look for Checkpoint to be hacked in a big situation? How bad did it look for CrowdStrike to be hacked? Seriously, as a security provider, what kind of brand damage caused that? What kind of revenue? So there really is that's the big thing. So I'll tell you, as a rule, the more regulated an industry is, the more people actually take it seriously. The bigger the dollar volume, the bigger the risk, the more people take it seriously. But the real problem with security is it's a great place from a career perspective because there's a massive shortage, but it's not fun and cool. And I'll let you know what I mean by that. So I want you to think about this from the perspective of the C-suite, from the perspective of the board. If I invest 100 million in this thing, oh, it might be my next 3 billion in revenue. If I invest 100 million in this thing, I have less risk, but I make no more money. So when you look at it from the fun, unfortunately, a lot of companies are a lot like people. Where do most people spend their money? On healthy foods, or on going to the movies, on going to vacation, going to fun places? Are they spending it on blueberries and broccoli? I mean, and that's there. So most people will tend to spend more on their fun than their health. I have pharmacist friends that tell me that people will literally go with a $2,000 pocketbook and $5,000 shoes and scream at the pharmacist over a $10 copay. Because unfortunately, some people are willing to pay more for some things than just others. And that is the downside of security. Now, the reality is that security is absolutely critical. And as organizations have more and more impact to the system, security becomes more and more critical. More stuff online, more stuff to go down. Stuff goes down in today's world, business is down. So you're seeing a reversal of it, and you're seeing some incredibly high salaries starting to come in security. But why is it? It's people are starting to realize, whoa, what happens when our systems are down? But generally, people like to invest in things that are revenue as opposed to things that are more safety, quality, what have you. I wish it wasn't the case, though. Quaco, hi, Mike. You had a CCSK boot camp. Who would I recommend it for? So, Quaco, kind of let me explain. I have a couple of cybersecurity things out there that I would recommend. So, I have a CCSP boot camp. If you are only going to do one cloud security one, I would recommend the CCSP. And why is that? For the most part, it contains everything in the CCSK and more. Now, so there is that. Now, when I did the CCSK, here's what I did, and here's who I would recommend it for, and I'll tell you what I would recommend you do. I looked at the CCSK curriculum and said, there's just not enough in it. So what I did is I took the CCSK curriculum and I expanded on it in certain places. And that way I made the CCSK a much more robust course than the basic CCSK would be. So there's realistically two ways that I would approach this. The primary way that I like to train people is to train for the job. And then after you have the job, then watch the certification stuff afterwards and then do the certifications. If for some reason you're in a position where you can't invest in actual training, here's what I would do. I would use that CCSK as an intro, and I would use it as a replacement for the Security Plus. It's much more substantial. I would start there. Then I would do the CCSP that's on my channel, And I think that will give you a deeper version and a reinforcement of it. The CCSP is more CISSP level, specifically related to cloud security there. And I would do those two, and that will give you a good intro to cybersecurity. And then after you have those two as an intro, and that will be a very good intro, then we need to figure out which job you want and then figure out how to get the skills for those jobs. But that will give you a very good intro. But my general preference is learn the job and then do these certifications. One of the reasons, Kwaku, I create those certifications and I put them out there is the following reason. Many of the people that are creating these certifications don't know anything about cybersecurity, have never worked in cybersecurity, couldn't get a job in cybersecurity. So the next thing you realize is they've got a security boot camp or a cloud boot camp. And sometimes they charge a lot of money. And the problem is if the person wastes their time in it, by the time they're done, they're going to have bad habits. They're going to have to forget. And then they're going to need to learn from scratch. So they wasted their time, which is actually not good for them. So I didn't want people to be trained by people that knew absolutely nothing. And I'm really tired of people coming to me and saying, Mike, I spent $5,000 on a CISSP boot camp and they know nothing of cybersecurity. Or I spent $4,000 on a CCSP boot camp and they still know nothing. Or they spent $7,000 in a week in a GUIA class, which is not a bad class, actually. That's one of the better ones. But still, in a week, there's not that much to learn. There's still so much more to learn, which is why my programs are so inexpensive for what they are. But that's what I recommend. I would basically say, do that as an intro, do the CCSP as an extra intro. At that point, you'll have some good fundamentals of cybersecurity. And then after that, figure out what you want to do and then get those specific skills. If you can't afford to just take a security training program, which is what I would tend to do from the start, and then do these afterwards to get certified after I was skilled. Good question. Hey, Darius. Does the security architect have to express their efforts positively impact the financials of a company similar to an enterprise architect? Well, yes. So, hey, Darius, I would imagine, so imagine this. You're now the client, you're the CEO. Hi, Darius, I have a way for you to add to your security for $1 billion. You know what your response is? Thanks, Mike. It was nice to meet you. Conversation 2. After a thorough analysis of your organization, our team saw that you have $2.7 billion of annual risk. And it's increasing by approximately 5% per year. $2.7 billion of annual risk. Now, as it turns out, for about $1 billion, we can mitigate 80% of that risk every year for the next 5 years. You'll still have about 20% of those risks, but we can mitigate about 80% of that. So now what are you looking at? You're looking at 80% of a $270 million risk for 5 years for a $1 billion spend. Or yeah, so 2.7 billion, 80% of a $2.7 billion risk for 5 years for $1 billion spend. They're going to be interested in it. So in a cloud architect or an enterprise architect world, we have to show the business value. Either we're showing it with a revenue uplift. For example, we've got a new website and the new website does more business. And therefore we're showing it. Maybe there's an AI recommendation engine that therefore increases the amount of money people buy. And we can predict that based on revenue. For security, what we do is we say, here's your risk. Currently, here's the cost to mitigate the risk, and here's your residual risk after mitigating. And if we can prove that it's cheaper to mitigate the risk, then actually then have the risk, then we can sell it. So yeah, great question. There's always a business element or a business case that's associated with anything that we actually do in architecture. It's a tough lesson to learn initially. We have to be able to prove why for every dollar we spend. You know, why is that? And actually, let me kind of help this, if this might actually help the audience of why we have to build this business, why we have to build the business case here. So let's say we're dealing with a normal organization. So normal organizations don't have a lot of money. So we could have opportunity A, and we could have opportunity B. Let's do this. And we may even have opportunity C. So here's the reality of any company. Now, I know of no company that has unlimited money. I mean, NVIDIA is looking pretty good, but for the most part, most companies don't have unlimited money. So we've got three different opportunities. So what would typically happen? So well, let's say with opportunity A, and I just want you to kind of get a feel for how businesses would do this. Let's say for opportunity in A, there's a 70%, we have a 70% confidence interval that we can achieve $800 million. And this opportunity, and let's say each one of these opportunities are going to cost us $300 million. All 300 million. So we've got this one we're 70% confident if it works, will yield 800 million, right? So we can easily figure out what this opportunity will be in a second, and I'll do it with you if you want. And then we've got opportunity B that we are not sure. It's a gamble. We are 40% concerned that this thing can do 1.7 billion if it works. And then we've got this opportunity here, which is our safe opportunity. We are 90% convinced that this opportunity will yield us $400 million. So what's each opportunity worth to us from a perspective of a company? And this is how they do this. This is called the expected value of the opportunity. The first one's 0.7 times 800 million, right? So I'm not Mr. Math, so I'm going to use a calculator on this. So this opportunity is worth 0.7 times 800, oops, 0.7 times 800, 000, 000. So this opportunity is worth 560 million to us, statistically speaking, and that's how the company would deal with it. And now this opportunity B, we'll take 0.4 times 1700, 000, 000. So this opportunity is worth $680 million. And what's this opportunity worth? 0.9 times 400 million. This one's worth 360 million. So as it would look to the organization, realistically speaking, this looks to be the best place to invest in their money. Now, if that organization is risk averse, it probably will choose this option over here. If they're completely risk averse, they're going to put their money in here and they're not going to get much of anything back. So the organization has competing needs and we have to figure out where. So that's why in any architecture, it really doesn't matter. We have to build the business case because companies don't just have unlimited amounts of money the same way you or I don't. So the same way you or I determine, well, do we buy a new car this year or do we do something else? Companies are saying, do I invest in this thing? And if I invest in this thing, what don't I invest? So we have to help show them the best. Great question, Idarius. I really appreciate that question. Andy, an enterprise architect told me they went to a client who had no business strategy in place. And they said, we cannot make an IT strategy if no business strategy is in place. Isn't it part of enterprise architecture? So Andy, it's yes, but let's talk about it. Let's say you want to walk into a company that has no business strategy in place. And you talk to them about creating a business strategy and they don't want any parts of a business strategy. What problems can you solve with technology? None. I mean, you might get lucky and you might just have a piece of technology and it might just work, but none. The likelihood of that working is about the likelihood of you being successful, going on a trip, having somebody else pack your bag, and then not knowing where you're going to be. But you're going to be at someplace in extreme weather. It's either going to be on the equator or the North Pole, and you have no idea, and somebody else packed your bag. You don't want to be with winter clothes and what do you call it, on the equator. You're not going to feel too good for long. And you definitely, worst case scenario would be in, say, Antarctica or the North Pole with a bathing suit because you thought you were going to Cancun, for example. So there is that. So depending upon the organization and their strategy and their practice, some companies don't want to deliver a bad product. There are times where I'd rather tell a client, you are not ready. You don't have that right now. You don't have the people to actually do what you're trying to do. You don't have the data to do what you're trying to do. Anybody that makes it for you, you're probably not going to be successful. Are you sure you want to do this? Or would you like to take this step to get there and then a second step to get there, and maybe 3 to 5 years you're there? Now, a really good architect can do that. But what if the client said no? And I'll tell you what I mean. And Andy, I've been in this position multiple times in my life. The first time I was in this position, I was very young. I was in my healthcare career. Patient had serious diabetes, incredible high blood pressure. He was 300 pounds overweight and he smoked 3 packs per day. His labs were so scary that I didn't even know how this person was alive, and they were in their 30s. And I had said to the person, and after meeting him, we got to speaking, I said, we have to make some changes now. And the person said, I'm not making any changes. I just don't care. And I said, the reality is, I don't think you can live 2 more years like this. And the person said, I don't care. They said, I'd rather die and I'd rather do this and I don't care and I'm never going to follow your instructions. So I did something that I thought that was right to me. That was the right thing at the time. I said to the patient, I said, oh, I'm glad you told me this. I said, I really want to help you. And if you change your mind, I'm going to recommend another provider for you. And I sent them a letter and I made a recommendation to another provider. If that person was going to take my advice, that person was going to die. And when they died, they would blame me for the person dying when the person said, I'm not going to take your medical advice. So I chose not to be their provider. I know many good organizations that are really concerned about their brand and their reputation, that when a company goes there and they try to do something that can't be done given the situation, they'll walk away from the business and say, this is not a good opportunity for me. I don't think we can help you here. Because which would you rather do? Would you rather walk away from a deal if you have the ability to and leave the place as bad as you found it? Or do you want your name and your fingerprints on a complete and total disaster where no matter what you do, it's going to fail? And that could be a career limiting move for you, your name, your reputation, what have you, could be damaged. So everything's a case by case basis. I've not had many clients over the years that I really walked away from. In fact, I was pretty harsh with one time, and I basically said, you have to do this. And if you don't do this, there's nothing more that I can do to help you. And the person finally said, okay. And then everything got fixed. But other than that, I've not had that problem in my world because I'm usually pretty good at actually explaining the rationale why. But there are times if you get a client like that and they're just not willing to do anything, why put your fingerprints on it? Why create damage and why damage your own brand? So some companies will definitely do that. And that's a good point. I'm glad you asked that. Andy, do I agree that strategy consultants from firms like BCG and McKinsey are a bit disconnected from reality? Even companies do not implement the majority of their suggestions. Do I agree? No, I don't agree. I think a lot of times, many of the work done by Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, Accenture, Deloitte is very, very good. Now, we have to look at why companies actually hire strategy consultants in the first place. And here's what I mean by that. If a company is really looking for external help and they're going to a strategy consultant, depending upon the consultants you get, they can be very helpful. They could be. They can also be fairly theoretical and academic in nature, but from a strategy perspective, you might need that. Now, having said that, why do people actually call strategy consulting firms or whatever? Why do people tend to use a certain vendor over another vendor? Well, let's talk about that. So if somebody uses a Microsoft infrastructure For example, the chief information officer chooses Microsoft for their cloud, for their primary operating systems, and for many of their pieces of enterprise software, like every enterprise for the most part. But let's say somebody does that. And let's say Microsoft has a meltdown. That CIO, in most cases, is going to be fine. And when the C-suite says, why did you choose Microsoft? We say they're the largest enterprise provider in the entire world. We say that 90-some% of companies are invested in their ecosystem, and we've used the standard of everyone. That person is safe. A lot of times, Andy, people call strategy consultants for the following reason. They have an idea, they want to deliver the idea, and they're going to pay a consulting firm to tell them that they're right, that it's a good idea. And why do they do that? Because I'm now the chief technology officer, chief operating officer, chief whatever. I have a new strategic idea. I brought in someone like McKinsey, and they looked at it and they said, wow, we've evaluated everything, and you are right. And now all of a sudden it falls apart. Guess what? We brought in McKinsey, we brought in the world's greatest leaders, and they agree. So in medicine, unfortunately, what we happen in America, because lawsuits are so bad, when someone comes in with a cold and chest congestion and chest pain, the physicians basically run $10,000 or more a test to make sure it's not something else. It's called cover your whatever. Now, a lot of times we employ strategy consultants working for a company to cover ourselves for them to say that you chose to do it was a great idea. So we really have to look at it. Look, here's the reality. I've worked with strategy consultants that were so good. My friend Frances is so good. She's taught me so much. I've worked with strategy consultants that had PhDs that are aloof and far separated from reality. I've worked with architects like David Lithicum and Russ White that are so good. And I've worked with architects that walking in the room with them terrifies me. So I don't think it's necessarily that the consulting groups are wild and out there. I think that a lot of the consulting firms tend to have people from Ivy League schools, and a lot of them are a little bit detached from reality. But there's a lot of great work done by consulting firms. I've had a lot of good work. I've worked with them for years, and I've seen many great things. But I've seen good people, bad people, capable people, incapable people across every industry. And that's the way I see it. Nice, Andy. Is a business degree, an MBA, a good bet for a security architect's future? Yeah. So, Darius, here's the way I look at it, and here's the way I look at jobs, degrees, what have you. First, is the juice worth the squeeze? And here's what I mean by that. Is it going to be worth it for you? What are you going to get out of it? So, for example, I have friends that became nurses at Temple University in Philadelphia, and basically they spent $20,000 for their education and now earn about $100,000 a year. And I know nurses who've gone to the University of Pennsylvania and spent $150,000 or $200,000 to be a nurse, and they don't earn a dollar more than the people that went to Temple University. Is that a good investment? Probably not. For something like that, where the pay is kind of fixed, I'd go to the cheapest place that I could get my education done. Now we look at a world like an architect job. We've got pay ranges from on the low end, say 130, and on the high end, $1 million plus a year. Now, what separates the difference between a $300,000 architect and a $500,000, an $800,000, and $900,000 architect? It's business acumen. Now, will you get all that business acumen in an MBA? No. But it will open it up and expose it to you to new things. So, Darius, one of the reasons I love the CISSP, I mean, I only spent 5 days taking it and preparing and passing the exam, but here's what I loved about it. It taught me all the things that I didn't know about security. It was a frame for me to learn. Same thing with passing the CCIE. It taught me how much I didn't know about networking, but it gave me a roadmap of things to learn and get better at. The same thing as my MBA. Here's what I did, Darius, when I did my MBA. Truth be told, I did 3/4 of an MBA at Drexel University, or maybe a half of it when I was young. And I was midway through that MBA, and I got the best job offer of my life. So I didn't finish that MBA, and I felt kind of bad about it. So many years later, I did a completely new MBA from Widener University in Chester, Pennsylvania, right by the Delaware border. And here's what I really liked about it. I lived in Princeton, New Jersey. It was a 90-minute drive to Delaware. And I lived in Princeton, New Jersey, and it was about 2 hours into New York City for me to go to the One Penn Plaza office at Cisco. So I had a really great time. I might drive into the New York office, which could take 2 hours, and I would listen to an audiobook. And then I would drive to Delaware to go to school, and I would drive home. So I had between 6 and 8 hours of drive time 3 days a week. Well, I was doing my MBA and going to school full time. So what did I do? If I was in a finance book, I got the best 3 or 4 books on tape, books on CD, books on whatever downloadable media I could find. And I went through 3 to 5 books a week in addition to my MBA. Now, 2 years later, that was a whole lot of books, assuming 3 a week for 100 weeks. That was 300 extra books that I read about business and leadership while I was actually in business school doing my MBA. So by the time I was done my MBA, I had a lot. Now, it wasn't just the MBA. I did executive training. And because I was older when I took the MBA, I knew which things to use and I learned more and more about it. That's when my career really rose. Whether I was doing security architectures, all of a sudden I was the executive in the room that everybody wanted to look to. When I moved into bigger enterprise architecture roles, and I love the security architect job. I think it's one of the most fun in the entire world. And of all that I've had, my favorite, specialty role is the networking architect and the security architect, and my favorite overall role is the enterprise architect role, but they're all great. And I've done them all, and I love them all. And all of them, the higher your salary is based upon your business acumen. So the MBA might enhance your business acumen. Actually, it will. And it also builds your brand and your credentials. So all in all, it's a good thing. But have your company pay for it. Go out there, work as an architect, and let them sponsor it. And add that to your training and development plan. I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. Chris, bring in the next one. In the past, what I have preferred about being a security architect versus a different type of architect? That's a great question. So the key is we have to think about how we actually think and what we actually do. So look, I came into networking and I love networking. Why do I love security? Well, it's kind of who I am. So I was like a 5-year-old and my parents took me on Florida and I literally walked through the airport and I said to my parents, and my parents were getting embarrassed. I said, here's a security weakness, here's a security weakness, here's a security weakness, here's a security weakness. And when I got home on a trip, I was like, we need to fix this thing on the door, fix this thing on the window, fix this. And my parents are like, what are you talking about? I said, we've got weaknesses in our security and we need to patch it. Weaknesses here. My parents were like, why do you think this way? And my brain always thought that way. I studied martial arts as a child and for 30 more years, and I always think about how do I protect it. My brain, when I walk into a room, I look in the room, I naturally find the exits. I look at where the threats might be, who's packing what based upon what bulges are where. And I naturally just do it. It's the way my brain works. So I naturally think, how do I protect others? I'm a medical person. We protect people. I spent 7 years as a paramedic, time as a registered nurse, time as a nurse practitioner practicing internal medicine. So everything that I've done my whole life is about how do I protect people? And what is security architecture? It's about how do I protect people, whether they be the customers, whether they be employees, how do I protect the property and how do I protect the assets? So my nature, philosophy, is just to protect people. And I've been doing it my whole life. So because of that, and I mean, I've studied physical security, executive protection, any kind of it. It's just interesting to me. And I'm always thinking about how do you protect something, whether it be a dignitary, whether it be a knowledge asset, because that's just the way my brain works, and I'm passionate about it. So that's why it was so much fun for me. Likewise, software development and application architecture, that's the thing that I'm the least interested in. Now, software development, I'm not an architect, so I would never be doing it. But the point is some people love to code. There are software engineers that absolutely love it. To me, it looks like cruel and unusual punishment, but some people absolutely love it. And the key is to really find what you're passionate about, find what you really, really, really love. And ultimately, I found that I love two elements. And I built my entire life on these 2 elements. Either protecting or growing and nurturing. I've either been somebody's medical practitioner or I've been their coach, and I've tried to get them, but that's just the way my brain works. And they're the only 2 things. So security architecture is protection. Enterprise architecture is about growth. Teaching is about growth. Regenerative medicine, which I've done some, is about growth, whereas and preventative medicine is about growth, whereas normal medicine is about protecting people. So that's why they're fun for me. Just who I am. Is it safe to say part of why architects earn well is because, like traders, they visibly generate resumes with the company work in? Yes, absolutely. Sales engineer, sales rep, cloud architect, solutions architect, we bring in money. We solve financial problems. So if you look at the exact opposite, and if you look, I'm in Forbes magazine and other magazines discussing this, there's two kinds of careers. There's careers that cost money, and there's careers that make money. In really good economic times, people hire both. In bad economic times, people that bring in money are hired while people that cost money are let go. Which is why what you see, and I hate it, but every time you see a mass layoff, the next day they're hiring sales reps, solutions architects, and sales engineers. I hate it, but it's true. So be on the front lines, be highly terrorist, be on the back end, not so terrorist. Sad? Wrong. I didn't even say it's right. Why does the actor make more money than the people behind the scenes that are filming it, that are video editing all that? I don't know. But I do know it to be true, and I know where to actually play the game if you want to earn more. And that's typically on the revenue side, on the business side, on the executive side. You're always paid better to be the leader and the strategist than you are the doer. Didn't say it was right, didn't say it was fair, didn't even say I agree with it, but I know what it is, so I know how to work the system. And that's why I advise people on how to work the system, so to speak, in a way that's going to make them better. Great questions. Are architects likely to be equally technically and business focused, or is there an inclination to one or the other? Well, it really depends on the architect. So let me kind of show you. And let's kind of map it out, and I'll show you the difference of what different architects might be focused on. So let's say we've got these two architects. Architect A is focused on a company's APIs, and they're focused on integrating these APIs with a whole bunch of systems. And they've integrated these APIs to a couple systems. They're great at APIs. They've done this. And now the systems talk to each other. This is a $120,000 architect. Why? Because all they've been able to do is figure out some technology things. And guess what? Lots of people can figure out technology things. So let's take architect B. Now, architect B really analyzed the business and looked at the organization. The architect B looked at the business capabilities. Let's just call it business capabilities. And they found that the business is best capabilities are that they have the best interactive shopping platform out there. Their other capability is they've got a recommendation engine. And the recommendation engine adds an additional 15% in sales by recommending products to this. And at the same time, when we look at the organization's capabilities, we see a weakness in first and second line support. In fact, what we actually see is that first and second level support are only able to catch 20% of the issues, and the other 80% have to go to tier 3 support. So what might this organization do, and how will this architect look at it? Well, the architect may realize that their interactive shopping platform is what's driving all their business, and the recommendation engine is doing something more. So how do they further enhance the interactive shopping platform? Now they've got a recommendation engine, but guess what? This recommendation engine is kind of static, it's kind of old, and it still actually works. But what if there's an AI recommendation engine that they think can double the sales? So they've got that new AI recommendation engine. Now when they realize that the products that they're selling that have support, their tier 1 and tier 2 people are missing 80% of the actual calls. And because the first and second tier people are wasting so much time, the clients are getting angry and they're starting to buy from someone else. So maybe as part of the new architecture, we've got a new AI support level 1, and support level 1 can actually close 50% of the tickets in 90 seconds. And the ones that it misses can go straight to a tier 3 person, and they can get the rest resolved quickly. So we get rid of the people that are bad at tier 1 and tier 2 support. We replace them with technology that can do it. Maybe we reallocate them to another part of the business where they'll be more successful. And then we hire more tier 3 people. It'll cost us less to provide better support here. We'll probably generate more sales with the AI recommendation when we enhance it. Now, this could be an $800,000 architect. Because what's the difference between the first architect and the second architect? This one evaluated their capabilities, knew their strengths, knew their weaknesses, and built a plan to make them better. The first one just talked tech. So that's really how you're going to define and see which architects thrive. Those architects that are strategists make unlimited amounts of money versus those that are just the techies, that are just a fancy version of an engineer. Velosaki. In my experience regarding learning and education, how does the architect's role compare to an engineer role? Absolutely nothing in common. In fact, I think and actually statistically speaking, the biggest reason people fail architect interviews is they behave and act like an engineer and they think like an engineer. So that's the biggest issue. Engineering is nothing to do with architecture. Engineering is how do I build it? Architecture is how do I design it? Engineering thinks tools. Architects thinks what are the business outcomes. So they're not related at all. And I'll tell you, after training people for decades, after taking engineers and making them architects, and I love engineers. I wish I could say it was a competitive advantage, but it's not. I mean, Wallace Agana, why am I using Wallace? Because his first job was an enterprise architect at JP Morgan Chase, the crown jewels of any bank and the biggest, highest position out there, enterprise architecture. It was his first tech job. We trained him. Al went over to Deloitte as a senior solutions architect as his first tech job ever. He was a great sales rep before we trained him. Just spoke to an Abdul this morning who got his first job that we trained him for as well. Again, first job in tech, and it doesn't matter. Lenny was our video editor, got his first job as a solutions architect. But Naformi, and I got to tell you, Naformi was honestly probably the best network and security engineer combined I've ever met in my entire life. But it took him a little bit longer, like 16 or 18 months. And then poof, he was in an architect role. And someone at his level at that point with his sophistication is serious. But it usually takes a little longer to turn an engineer into an architect than it does to take someone that's not an engineer. And why is that? It's the same reason that when you train nurse practitioners and physician's assistants, if they were nurses first, it usually hurts them. And I'll tell you why. Because nurses that are trained to be doctors, nurses are known to do things. And now all of a sudden, nurses have to do a planning role versus a doing role. And you can see it. When I went to school to be a nurse practitioner, the nurses that have been nurses for 10 years, they were really struggling because they wanted to act like a nurse with their patient. And when I learned medicine without really spending any time as a nurse, it was easy for me because I didn't have any things to unlearn. So engineering is great. Sales, much more aligned to architecture. Strategy consulting, much more aligned to architecture. So not a lot of carryover from engineering. Very different. That's how I'd compare them. Performance-wise, what delivers a good architect from a bad one? Excellent question. The architect that delivers the goal, the business goals, is a good one. So if the goal of the new website was to increase revenue by 20%, and the new website increases revenue by 20% or greater, you're a good architect. If the organization was trying to have an AI software development system that creates 80% of their code, and you design that strategy and 80% of their code is written by AI, you are a good architect. So a good architect can take a client's goals and actually create a strategy and actually make it happen. Same thing as a good doctor. The good doctor is the one that takes you regardless of your condition and makes you healthy. That's a good doctor. The good architect is the one that delivers the results the client wants again, 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 and again. How that architect does their job, I don't care. I don't care if they're an expert schmoozer and they can build a team of 50 people, and that team of 50 people will design them the best architecture in the world, and that architecture solves that company's problems. They're a great architect. Likewise, they could be a super technical person who then builds a team, and the team does it for them too. I don't care, but the results speak for themselves. Architecture is measured in results. Medicine is measured in results. Sales is measured in what's your revenue, what are your results. So that's how you measure things, actual results. But other attributes like executive presence, leadership, communication skills, sales skills, business acumen, they're definitely traits of a better architect. Hi, Darius. Good to see you again. You have shown the career path of other architects, the road of economic progression and responsibility. What does the growth of the security architect look like? What opportunities are next? What a great question, Darius. So let me show you where you can go with these roles. And let me kind of show you the overall architect continuum in terms of seniority. So you really have two places to go. So if we look at a normal IT organization, at the top, we have the CIO. Now, we also will typically have the chief architect, which is an enterprise architect role, very high paid role. This could be a $500,000 or more position. We typically have a VP of IT. We typically have a chief technology officer. And we may also, we also will typically have a CISO, or chief information security officer. So if we look down this path, as a rule, not always, as a rule, if we go this way, less technical, the money increases dramatically. So then let's look at what we focus on at where. At this point, it's pure strategy. At this point, it's 80% strategy, people, processes, technology, what have you. By the time we get to a cloud architect role, we're dealing with a complete total generalist, because they're going to be dealing with AI and IM and applications and networking, security, and everything you could possibly imagine. And it's not going to be possible to be an expert on that. So they're going to need a team. So they're going to find a team of specialty architects like them. So that puts us into this position where these specialty architects are down here, where generally speaking, the highest pay goes here. So the progression of a security architect would be different, and it would look something more like this. And these are your, realistically speaking, your options and your decision tree for the security architect. Role one could be the person wants to stay a subject matter expert. So we've got a security architect, and they're good at what they do. This person designs that they are infatuated with AI security. And because they spend time and they live, eat, and breathe AI security, they become very good at it. And now this person becomes like a principal architect. Now, the reality is this is a very high paid position. I was a principal architect within 2 years of the time I started, because I had a passion for networking and security, and that was my focus. So 2 years later, I was the principal security architect. Now, if you look at a cloud vendor or a major vendor like Cisco, a principal security architect role is about 375K, like in an Azure or an AWS or any of these kind of companies, a Cisco kind of thing on average. So that's a pretty good salary with their pay range of say 300 to 500. Now that's one opportunity. Opportunity two is security architect focuses a lot more on leadership skills. And that gives them, and they focus on leadership and they focus on business. They focus on business leadership and executive skills. So that, realistically speaking, opens two different opportunities for the security architect. The one opportunity is they go down the executive enterprise architect path and they move from the security architect to the enterprise architect. And that was me. This is what I was interested in doing. And that's how I took my career, because I love a little of everything. Now, the alternative would be to take this into a CISO role. The enterprise architect would move to the chief, would go down the chief architect. Potentially the CIO path or bigger. And what we could do here is we could take the CISO and potentially progress that to a CIO. So these are typically the ways you could take it. You know, the people that stay more focused on the technology go this way. The other people either go down the enterprise architect, chief architect, and then C-suite person, which is exactly what I did. And then the other people focus on moving into a CISO role. And then if it's may want a bigger role, like a CIO role coming afterwards. So they're your kind of real pathways. How do you want to take it? They're both really great options. The option is, where are you going to be happiest? All these questions today. Chris, we can bring in the next one. You'd like to move up in the future as an architect. Does the MBA cost and school matter? So this is a tough one to answer. And I'll tell you what it used to be, Dingleman, and I'll tell you what it is today. So it used to be, if you were in the top 10, that absolutely meant something. And if you weren't, go spend as little as you could to get done. And in those days, the top 10 was the Yales, the Harvards, the Penns, the Columbias. Now, one of the things we have to think of, Dingleman, is there are a lot of companies that are actually boycotting those institutions and won't hire their graduates. So, not here to say right, wrong, or anywhere in between, but there are many organizations in boycott of these specific Ivy League schools. So that means, is it still a competitive advantage going to one of those schools? The answer is, I don't know. So at this point, what I would say, and after looking at the world and after seeing the world and being in a couple of decades in education, I can tell you that I've replaced Harvard MBAs. I've fired a lot of people from Ivy League schools that were too out there. And then again, I've taken people from schools that know so much. So if we actually look at what's going on globally, we've got organizations that have realized they still like degrees, they still like skills, they love knowledge, but many of the schools aren't producing students that actually know anything whatsoever. So what you saw was companies like IBM and Cisco and Microsoft and Amazon start to drop degree requirements. So what did they hire for instead was actually skills. So the key is, I don't really care where you get your MBA, Dingleman, and I know you. We found you. We helped you get your first job. Now you're in a great security architect job. I'm very, very, very proud of you. And I love the fact that you want to keep going with your education. I would tell you to do it. Save the money along the way. Get your education. And realistically speaking, it really doesn't matter. Now, I have to tell you, I've skied and I've given presentations at schools. You know, Chris works for us, and his father is a professor, Cooper Johnson works with a professor named Jamie Long. I have to tell you, when I watch them teach, and I'm lucky enough to see it, I wish I was still in school. And I know they're in Tennessee at the University of Tennessee at Market, and I would send my kids there if they could get the kind of education that Cooper and Jamie provide, because I've seen what they literally give. And I've been on the campus of Ivy League schools, and I've seen goofiness, and I've been on the campus of Ivy League schools, and I've seen great. The key is you. It's never the martial art that matters. It's the martial artist and how they apply it. It's never the school that you went to. It's how you were as a student. If you went to a small private school like I did, but were obsessive compulsive about learning, I learned a lot more than the school was going to teach. But I would have learned a lot more than the school was going to teach anywhere. So I don't think it matters. I realistically don't. Many years ago, there were certain schools that taught a different level of soft skills. They don't do it anymore. I don't think it matters. I do like it, but I'd probably try to spend as little money as actual possibly on it. That's what I would do if I was going to go to school in the U.S. Dingelman, you're doing great. I'm very, very, very excited for you and proud for you. And it's been an honor to help you along the way. You have a master's degree in cybersecurity and the CISSP, but you're only a year into your career as a cybersecurity engineer. In my opinion, what should your career path look like? What do you want? What do you want to do? So I want to make it clear, there are no rules. When I started tech and I left internal medicine, I'm a nurse practitioner, like I said, somebody tried to tell me that I was supposed to be a network admin, and then I was supposed to work as a junior network engineer, and then after that, I could be a regular network engineer. And what happened? I went on my first interview and I was hired as a senior network engineer. 3 months later, I was a lead architect, and within 2 years, I was the principal solutions architect. Now, I will say, I invested heavily in training and education. I will say I learned a lot more earlier in my career, but 1 year in my career, I was already in a very senior role. I was a senior network architect working on Wall Street. At the same time, when I got to my first job and I was hired as a senior engineer, I was helping those people that had been there for a decade. And they knew less than I did. So the key, Arturo, is what do you want to do and what do you love? What could you put a level of passion at where you could go in with 100% effort, 100% focus for 8 months, 12 months, learn something, and then change your life forever? That's my perspective, because there are no rules. I made it to a level within the first 6 months that other people took 15 years to. The first job I wanted, the silly job descriptions written by HR that are meaningless about experience, it said 10 years, I had 0. The second job said that I got 9 months later, said 15 years, I had 6 months. Nobody cares. So what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? If you're not where you want to be, you can fix it. And that's no big deal. But what are you doing? Are you actually happy? Are you earning what you need to? It has absolutely nothing to do with the number of years you have there. Arturo, it's really funny because I look at the world differently, and I know it, and people tell me I look at the world differently. And I'll give you an example of me and one of my closest friends, Todd. And Todd and I both love anatomy. We study it in our spare times. I had to learn anatomy because, if you're going to inject a joint, you need to know where to put the needle inside the joint. I had to learn anatomy. My friend Todd is a yoga instructor and a massage therapist, and he just loves anatomy as it pertains to yoga. Now, we spent a lot of time, and Todd's knowledge of anatomy is just as good as mine, which creeps me out. And here's the reason why. I was forced to learn anatomy because it was my career, and I spent about a year learning anatomy. And that was my job. My job was dependent on it, so I treated it like my life depended on it, and my patient's life did, because it did. My friend Todd learned it over the course of, 20 years of teaching yoga, massage, and a hobby. We're the same level of good. Difference is, I got it in 6 months. He got it over 20 years. I got it through formal education. He got it through experience. Doesn't matter how we got it. The question is, do you want to get it in a year? And if you want to get it in a year, you can get it in a year or two. Or if you want to get it in 10 or 20, you can do that. So that's up to you. As Napoleon Hill said, you can push the effort to get more. And unfortunately, what's taught in universities is not going to be enough for you to really be where you're at. Or you can take it and slowly learn on the job. Both approaches are right. The ROI and the salary of impact of focusing on bigger skills now will make a multi-million-dollar difference in your career if you choose to go that way. But you'll be highly successful. Why don't you come to the free security architect webinar tomorrow? And that way I can assess you. I can see where you're at, and I'd be happy to make recommendations for you, whether it's architecture or something else, but I'll be able to really assess where you're at in your career and provide any kind of recommendation I can. And it's all free. Do enterprise architects work with IT service management, or is the main focus strategy in or between them? So I don't spend a lot of time with service management, but I spend some. And let me explain to you why. I have to communicate with every stakeholder, and I have to make sure the client has the sophistication to adopt the technology, manage the technology when I am not actually there. So, when I speak to stakeholders, I could be speaking to the C-suite. It could be speaking to the board. I will be speaking to various business units heads, various IT departments as well. Because if people can't manage it, we can't actually use it. If the people don't have the sophistication to implement it, what have you, or maintain it, we don't use it. So I definitely do have conversations with service management. But I might also ask them, what tools are you using that have proved useful? Which tools are not working? So I'm going to have conversations with anything. And that's why stakeholder management is about 75% of the job. I'm literally not joking. Speaking with literally everybody, getting their perspective, getting their challenge, understanding their pain points, and understanding what you can do about it. Oh, that's our job, Andy. That is definitely our job as enterprise architects. So anybody that we need to speak to along the way, we're going to speak to them along the way. And I promise you there's a whole lot of people to speak to along the way. Great question, Andy. What are the differences between a security architect working at a consultancy versus a vendor versus an internal side? Okay, so all in all, there's basically there's three different roles and there's three different places. So let's say you work as a solutions architect working for a vendor. So let me kind of show you where they would all fall into the system, and I'll show you the differences of these roles. So if we go back to this slide, which I talked about, and we talked about, we've got the strategists that are running the division. We've got our executive architects. We've got our general architects themselves. And then we have our specialty architects. And then we have solutions architects. So let's talk about the difference of these two first. The security architects that we have inside of our company are concerned about securing our company and our company only. They work for us. So they're going to be focused 100% on our enterprise-wide security. And they are going to be internal. They'll be meeting with executives. They'll be meeting with internal teams, what have you. So that is their job. Now, I'm a security architect, and all of a sudden, I actually need security gear. Maybe I need a firewall from, say, Palo Alto, or maybe I need a SIEM system from Cisco or something like that. So they're going to send their solutions architects to us, their security solutions architects, to convince us to buy their stuff. So the solutions architects themselves are not what you would typically call a trusted advisor because they're part of sales. They are very biased, and they are there to help you sell their stuff. So the Cisco solutions architect is going to design, present, and sell Cisco stuff. The AWS solutions architect is going to try to convince you to use their stuff. So these roles over here for the vendors are almost always pre-sales. Design it, give a bunch of presentations, and sell it. Whereas this security architect that's working for the company is going to be living there. This one's getting sales bonuses for as a rule. This one's being a paid in play that actually works there. So that brings you into the world of the two kinds of non-customer environments that you might have. So let's say you've got one, you're at a vendor like Cisco. And let's say you're in another situation like Deloitte. Doesn't matter. Here, what's your job? Meet with clients. Whether they be their stakeholders, create the architecture or develop the architecture with the team's input. The sales process, that means RFP responses, that means customer facing meetings, what have you. There's typically some sale. There's the deal close. And then we go to a new client, new sale. Now let's say we're at Deloitte. We're going to meet with clients the same way we would. We're going to use our internal teams to develop the architecture. We're going to create the process of all the people that we're going to need, all the vendor gear that we're going to need, and all the partners. So we'll go through the sales process. We'll close it. And then when we're done, we're going to go work on a new client. So in any of these vendor environments, for the most part, the job's going to be mostly the new thing. We're going to work with one client and go to the new one. Now, if you're at the client itself, it's going to be a little different. And here's what's different at the client. So all of a sudden, we have a new architecture. So we do whatever is necessary to develop the architecture. And then after we develop the architecture, we have to convince the team to actually adopt it. So we've got to do our own little sales adoption process. And then typically speaking, then we need to create any kind of governance structures that we're going to need. So it's governance, guidance, those types of things. It's the documentation package. And as soon as you've got the problem solved and you've created your architecture, guess what? The business wants to do something else that they've never done for us, and now it goes back to another new architecture. Because business needs change, laws change, regulations change, all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of this circular process. Design an architecture, finish the design, go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one, and go to the next one. Okay, I think we have one more question, and I definitely want to answer that. What do I think about certification or certified business architect, a professional credential from the Business Architecture Guild that formally recognizes an individual's? Honestly, Andy, if I'd see it, I'd toss it in the trash. I wouldn't waste my time and look at it at all. So we have to look about the difference between executive roles and more junior roles. In executive roles, for example, I was asked to remove the CCIE and the CISSP from my business cards because it would make people think of me in the wrong way. I was told it would make people think of me as more of a techie as opposed to more of a strategist. Do you know what you don't see? You don't see chief executive officers getting certifications. Do you know what you don't see? You don't see corporate strategists getting big levels of some communication. So as you move up the round, your architecture roles, you're going to be removing the certifications from your resume. And something from a business architecture guild would not be something that would impress me. It would honestly make me wonder why a person's wasting their time on a certification at that level, as opposed to enhancing their business acumen, deepening the relationships, what actually have you. So I don't believe in certifications for exec stuff as a rule. That's why, you're not going to see the Cisco VP saying, I'm a certified this. They don't care. Even if they have certifications, they would hide it because they want to be seen more as an executive. And that's what I want more for you. The key is in an executive role, stop thinking about certification, start thinking about papers and think about delivery. I'm a CEO. What do I care? Somebody shows me their 20 different certifications. And I just watched Jerry Maguire the other day, and it was because had me reminding it. But in the movie, Cuba Gooding Jr. says, "Show me the money." And what he meant was, show me the actual impact, the results of your actual work. Show me the money. And that's what builds your career, Andy. Show the client the money. You were designing an architecture to save them money. You saved them 400 million bucks. You showed them the money. You're trying to increase the thing. Show me the money. Certification for governance. If it's not a law degree, again, it's a waste of time. Certification and governance don't care. If it's a law degree, I care. But otherwise, again, big expert things. Certifications are meaningless and worthless. You have to take them off your job. You're not trying to get them. So I seriously want you to look at executives. And look at the executives, the highest paying people that are learning, $1 million or more a year. You'll never see a certification on their resume ever. So no certifications, outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. And your company, if they ever want you to get it, they might send you to training to do one for legal purposes, but then they'll tell you to hide it and just make sure you have it anyway. So no, please don't waste your time on a bunch of certifications. Just enough to build a credential, and then literally speaking, just stop worrying about certifications. At some point, they become like this Apple Watch that I bought the other day because it was easy to use. And it sends me like 18 million rewards each day. Rewards you've achieved this, rewards you've achieved this. I don't care. I just want to know what time it is. So kind of think of it that way. What does the executive care about who you're going to be client to versus what do non-executives care about that are not your client? Anyway, it was so much fun having conversations with you. So on Thursday, join me for a completely free How to Become a Security Architect webinar. We'll go over the security architect skills. What does a security architect do? And everything that you need to do to have an incredible security architect career. It's completely free. It's on Zoom. I'll answer any question you desire. So please come prepared with questions and come prepared to build a security architect career. I'd also like to remind everybody that today is the last day of the 50% off summer savings. So if you're interested, if you've been thinking about it, take advantage of it today before it goes away. And if you've had a good time, maybe like the video, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to assist you in your architecture career. Take care.